Welcome to the Reflective Ecclesia podcast. Our aim is to edify the church towards deep thought and Christ-centered action. Let's jump right in. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us. I have the privilege of being joined today by my good friend, Missionary Desi Lugo. Now, before I let him get into his background, I just want to take a second to introduce him personally. I came to him as a young man many years ago, had a lot of questions, and he was still figuring out what he was going to do with his life. But at that time, he showed a lot of kindness to me as a young man, and he just really sat with me and answered my questions and talked with me. And I really began to discover his heart as a teacher at that point in time. And I remember thinking, man, if I could learn the skill that he has in dealing with people with questions, that would be a pretty good thing to pick up. And over time, we've kept in touch, and he felt the call of God in his life to become a missionary, and that just elevated him even higher in my eyes. And now he's on this crazy thing called deputation, and he'll get into all of that. But without further ado, Mr. Desi Lugo, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome, Nathan. Glad to be here and have this opportunity to have a discussion with you.
Yes. Now, the audience has written in and they've asked several questions across a bunch of different categories.
Mm-hmm.
And so our conversation is probably going to have to span multiple parts.
I'm fine with that.
Yes. And so this conversation, we're going to focus mainly around the story of what it means to be a missionary, your background, your drive, and what it is that you're getting into. In later conversations, the audience wants us to talk about the state of the church. They want us to talk about faith crises and suffering.
Okay.
And so we'll get into all of that in future conversations, but let's start with part one, which is just the foundation of your motivation and background. Tell the audience, what is a missionary really? Like, what is that you do, just at a high level? I'm assuming most people know what a missionary is, but describe it in case someone doesn't have the picture of what a missionary is.
All right. So a missionary, at least the way that we use that term now, in modern Christendom in the Western world, is a minister, man or woman, who has left their passport country, their place of citizenship, the place that they call home, and they have relocated to another geographic location on the planet, another country, and they are doing missions work, i.e. doing work of the church in this foreign setting where they feel that their responsibility, their God call, is to now go and serve people in a geographic location, in a cultural context that is not native to their own. Put differently, a missionary is someone who has been sent from one place to do ministry in another place.
Okay, when I hear that, I think, frankly, that's a lot of sacrifice. There's, the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, the scripture says, and I'm surrounded by people,
Yes.
who need to hear the gospel and who need the touch of the church and Jesus upon their life. But why would someone choose to uproot their entire family and move to a foreign country? And tell the audience what country specifically you moved to.
Sure.
Why would someone choose to go to a developing nation and why that as opposed to anything else you could be doing?
All right. So my wife and I both felt, you could say, a calling, a draw to missions work very early in our ministry. Very early. My wife, Rachel, and I met in Bible school. Mm-hmm. We both attended a private Pentecostal Bible college, a 4-year program for training in ministry in Stockton, California, Christian Life College. And we both had a desire to do missions work, i.e. to do church work outside of the United States. We met and connected on a school missions trip to Sweden when we were in Bible school. Now, it took another almost 20 years before we actually ended up going and doing missions work. But when you ask why, what would drive someone to do that? What would cause them to do that sort of work? I can speak for us. I don't know that it's the same for everyone, but in general, I think that most people who are global missions minded, as in people When I say mission, we could be talking about the work of God's kingdom anywhere. But in this conversation, I'm talking about people who are going to leave their home, their passport country, their place of citizenship, and they're willing to move and go to another country in a different context. And I think there are certain people who have a drive, I would say a God-given drive, that gives them a desire to see the world, that gives them a desire to work in foreign and different cultures and contexts, gives them a desire to take the gospel message and ministry to far away and distant places that they are not currently familiar with. Something that God places in them that gives them not simply a burden for another place. Yes, you want that, but also a God-given call, this invitation, this yearning inside of them to go to some foreign context. You asked where we served, and we can swing back around to this later.
Yeah.
My wife and I and our 3 kids started in the island nation of Vanuatu in the South Pacific. It's a small archipelago of 83 islands, 500 miles due west of Fiji. So you find Fiji on a map, look to the left, the next chain of islands that you'd see on a map, that's Vanuatu. And that's where we spent several years. And now we're currently on deputation. We'll swing back around to that a little later in this conversation and define that. And that's because we are changing fields, changing location. And next year in 2026, we're now headed to the island nation of New Zealand, specifically to focus on the South Island of New Zealand. Totally different context. We'll come back to that.
Both very different than America.
Yes.
So to put it in context for the audience, following this inner drive, asking what motivates you, you're saying this call of God, this drive that the Lord has to place in someone's life, took you from the comforts, for better or for worse, of America and into an island nation that is extremely different than America is.
Yes.
And I want you to tell us some stories here, soon, and now you're going to be going to New Zealand, which is very different from Vanuatu and still very different from the United States.
Yes.
So you are having to really exercise the skill of adaptability. Like you can't just assume that the skills that you've been raised in, the customs, the way you're used to speaking, even probably some of your philosophical frameworks about humans should interact are probably challenged, out.
Very much so.
Yeah. Explain to me more about that.
Define the question a little more.
Okay, so
you said several things.
Sure. So you could probably minister to anybody here in the United States, and of course, there's great variation within the United States, but English works anywhere in the United States, and so people think using similar common words and structures. And so when trying to persuade someone of the gospel or introduce Jesus to them, you could probably call upon certain shared experiences, certain shared turns of phrases, common cultural landmarks, all things that generally Americans would have in common. But you go to Vanuatu, and none of the things I just said apply.
Absolutely none. Throw it all away.
And so you are then left with just the skill of how do I adapt? Like none of the skills I've learned so far in terms of how I would naturally just present something are going to work here. I have to find new tools, new skills, whether it's through translators or it's through material that I develop, and they're it's totally new skills and ways of thinking and doing that you have to just learn, kind of crash course. You're out here that nobody's coming to save you. You got to learn. So I guess what I'm asking you to talk about is more of that experience. What is it like to have to be just, hey, you're in the fire now, sink or swim, and adapting under pressure?
So as a missionary, not just us, but anyone, and it's not just Americans. So you heard me earlier talk about your passport country, your place of citizenship, what you consider your home. Anyone who is leaving their home context and moving to a different cultural context, different geographical location, is going to have to work through this. And if they can't work through the things you just described, they're probably not going to last as a missionary. And then even working as a missionary, they're going to be continually frustrated and they probably will not feel very successful. I just wanted to make it clear, missionaries aren't just like Americans going to other places. You get people, and I read cases, people in churches in Africa who move to another country in Africa, people from South America who move to another place in Europe, people from Europe who move to somewhere else in Asia. Those are all missionaries as well. Someone leaving their home context and going to another context. And when you do that, you have got to learn to adapt to this new set of parameters. And you have to recognize that language is almost surface level. Right?
Okay.
So to use an analogy of like an iceberg, I've got the stuff on the surface that's really, really easy to distinguish and pick out very, very quickly. So the clothing that I wear, the types of food that I eat, the language that I speak, those are all on the surface. You can immediately see the differences in that.
Okay.
That's actually the easy part. That's the easiest part of it,
Okay.
is recognizing these differences and having to make the adaptation for that. Then there's all the stuff that's underneath the surface of the water. So like with an iceberg, you're only seeing the small little tip that's sticking out of it, but there's a huge chunk of that piece of ice that's not visible under the surface of the water. And so the next level down are going to be relationships.
Like how relationships
How
work.
relationships work, what's important, how they view things, okay? An example of that, coming from America, we are Western world, we're very individualistic.
Okay.
We strongly believe in autonomy, independence, self first. Going to a country like Vanuatu, which is a pretty extreme contrast from America.
Okay.
And the Ni Vanuatu people, the Nivans, they are not Western. They are not individualistic, and they are not self-oriented. First off, they're tribal, and they are literally tribal. Each island is a different tribe. Each tribe speaks its own language.
Oh my gosh. So
83 islands. Some of the larger islands have more than one tribe. You've actually got more than 100 different language groups across those 83 islands.
Just in Vanuatu.
Just in Vanuatu. All right, so they're tribal, and they identify themselves with their tribe. So if they're from Epi, or they're from Santo, or they're from Melakula, or they're from Efate, or Anaichum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are all different islands.
Wow.
The point is that's their tribe. That's their group of people, and that's how they identify. And then even within the tribe, they're thinking collectively of the group. So when I talk to someone from Vanuatu, their first way of thinking and the way they interact with me is not as an individual, but it's part of that collective whole. When they make decisions, they're not just thinking about themselves, they're thinking about their tribe, their family, then their village, then their tribe, and everyone around them. I'll give you an easy example of this. I was very early in the country. I met one of our students who was enrolled in the ministry training program, and I introduced myself, told him my name was Desi. I asked him what his name was, and immediately, without even thinking, he introduced himself by saying, "My father is," and he named one of the pastors on that island.
Okay. His first marker of identity
First marker of identity was to tell me who his father was.
Okay.
He didn't even tell me his name. I said, "My name is Desi. It's nice to meet you. What's your name?" And he said, "Oh, I'm the son of," and he named his father.
Wow.
And I complimented. I said, "Oh, okay." And I knew his father, and his father was a man of high esteem and reputation. I get that. But then I had to ask him a second time, and I had to point blank say, "What is your name?" And then he smiled and he said, "Oh, my name is," and he told me who he was. But without thinking, his first marker of identity was to identify his family lineage.
So could you unintentionally, without being aware, you talk about language and clothing as the surface, not being aware of these under the surface pieces of the iceberg, could you unintentionally be sabotaging your own ministry? Like what is the pitfall a missionary has to avoid, with, because you talked about, over 100 different languages and subcultures, even just within Vanuatu. There's no way you can map everything perfectly in your head. So
you're not going to be able to map it all.
So what do you do?
Well, you asked first off, you said, can you make mistakes and can you harm your ministry or witness or the things you're doing there? Absolutely, 100%. Is that possible? Most certainly. And in fact, I'll go a step farther. I think at some point, probably every missionary has done this repeatedly and made blunders, and I made lots of mistakes,
Sure.
and I will continue to make mistakes.
Maybe we can
Hopefully
get
you
one.
have enough grace and presence and kindness that you can overcome that, and people can see your attitude, if it's a good attitude, and they can work through that. And I'll come back to that in a second. I give you examples of that. So that was one example of many. So that's under the surface. So individuals, I'm thinking of myself, versus people who are tribal or collectivist. They're thinking of their family, they're thinking of the tribe, who they represent. Little farther down, honor, shame. Western world, we are a guilt, innocence context. Our legal system, everything is about what's guilty, what's innocent.
Wow.
Our definition of right and wrong is determined by
A legal code or
a legal
standard?
code and a standard of acceptable in society.
Sure.
This is what, well, in their culture, it's not that they have no concept of right or wrong or guilt or innocence, but the primary driver is honor and shame. So what brings honor or preserves honor within my tribe and family? What would be a shameful activity? Internally, philosophically, Westerners, Americans, I'm speaking in broad terms in general, are driven by what we consider to be right or wrong, and we're driven by what is guilty or innocent. I determine my actions and what is acceptable by, is this morally acceptable? Is this legally acceptable? Am I guilty? Am I innocent? And in honor shame culture, I don't think of that first. I'm thinking of what brings honor to my family? What is shameful to my family?
Whether it's legal or illegal.
That's secondary concern.
Sure.
And so when I'm making decisions and filtering how I respond to things and what I do in public, the primary motivating factor is what's honorable versus what's shameful. And so as a Westerner, I'm interacting with someone and they're doing something that, from my perspective, here's an easy one, it seems like a lie. Maybe it's in a little lie, but it's like they're not being honest with me. They're not being truthful in their interaction with me. But they're not thinking honesty versus lying. They're not thinking truthful versus dishonest. They're thinking about what saves face, what preserves reputation in this conversation.
And so they have done the correct
They have done
moral
the
thing.
right moral thing
by
preserving honor. Whereas in my mind, I may be looking at something they've done and I'm thinking,
tell the truth.
This is someone, with a lack of integrity. And I'm talking like inside Christian circles.
Wow.
And I'm thinking this is somehow a lack of integrity because they weren't forthright and honest with me.
Yeah.
Well, that's my cultural value. That's my cultural moray. Not only am I American and Western, I grew up in a military context. I'm an Air Force brat. And so we place an extreme high regard on being precise, being concise, being very direct, clear communication. And then I go to a context where it is shameful to say no. It is shameful to...
Someone's going to agree to something because you're the missionary, even because that brings honor to them and their family.
And it saves face.
Oh, man.
So it's shameful to directly say no. They say no, but not with the word, no, I don't want to do that, or no, that's not acceptable. They're going to find an indirect way to communicate how uncomfortable they are.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
It is extremely frustrating when you first get started because you're going to probably misunderstand things. Culturally, in Vanuatu, the Nivan people are non-confrontational. So their culture is very passive. And so you don't want to do things that draw attention to you in public. You don't want to do things that single you out as the individual. And so even saying yes or saying no, they're going to communicate a lot with their faces. I don't know if you just caught it. I said yes. So raising my eyebrow is a yes. And a sideways glance is more like a no, maybe a tiny nod of the head. That's all you're going to get. Even in public, we wave down and catch public transportation, and it's this little taxi system. It's like a 12-passenger bus, and I tell them where I want to go, and I'm asking the driver, are you heading this direction? And he does that, and I repeat the question. This is a real story, happened multiple times till I figured it out. Are you going into town? I'm waiting for him to say something.
His
I'm like,
eyebrows.
are you? And he's already told me 3 times, yes, I'm going, because he raised his eyebrows. Or I'm asking him, are you going this direction? And he shoots his eyes to the side. And I ask it again. And he does this tiny little twist of his head like that. He said no. But I am waiting for him to verbally say, no, I am not going that direction.
Yes.
But he's not going to do that.
For listeners that aren't watching the video or only have the audio,
Okay.
Desi is making...
I'm raising my eyebrows to say yes, and I'm doing this tiny little twist of my head.
Very easy to miss, especially if someone's, in a dark, underneath in a car and you're outside in the rain. Like, it seems like that'd be right for, at least for me, if I was in your shoes,
Totally.
to completely miss and be very
And
frustrated.
to learn to like look really closely in the window, like the driver, at what he's doing, until you get used to it. Then you in time pick up these things. So that's one level. Now let's go even deeper under the water, and this could be hours of conversation, but we're talking about things we miss. So surface level, the clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, the words that I'm speaking. Under the surface. So am I an individualistic culture versus a collective culture? Am I a guilt innocence culture versus an honor shame culture, or a power fear culture, or something like
already that? That's already so much that, and you're saying there's another layer deeper.
Yeah, so now we're going to get even deeper than that. And by the way, if you nerd recommendation, if you want to go back later and you want to get an overview of these different kind of dynamics from a Christian perspective, I highly recommend the book, The 3D Gospel. And it talks about the gospel and how it reaches all cultures, but the way it's communicated and these are the 3, a guilt innocence versus an honor shame versus a power fear culture. Wow. So those 3 different interactions. And how they interact with each other. Highly, highly recommend that book, The 3D Gospel. So let's go even deeper now. Now we're talking about the things that are way, way under the surface, things that are never spoken, the things that everybody knows. I say that in air quotes, everybody knows. Things that are culturally accepted or unaccepted, that are not even verbalized, because these are the things that everybody knows, but everybody doesn't know, the foreigner doesn't know. Your worldview, how you process information, how you look at how the world and how you explain and understand everything that happens around you. In the Western world, even if you are not Christian, we are deeply, deeply influenced by Greek philosophic thought and Platonic thinking going back thousands of years. And so we're looking for cause and effect. We're looking for reasons behind actions. And when we look for our reasons, I'm looking for a linear sequence of events that says this led to this, led to this, led to this. Vanuatu, it's a Melanesian, that's their ethnicity. It's a Melanesian country. It's a tribal culture. It's a group of islands in the South Pacific. Their worldview is not Western at all, and their worldview is animistic. And so when I say animism, here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about they have a duality in their mind between a physical and a spiritual world, and they run parallel. It's not like spirit is way out here and physical is way over here.
Everything physical is spiritual.
There's a spiritual world right on top of the physical world that's invisible to the eyes, but running in parallel with it. And everything that happens in the physical world has a spiritual reason behind it. The physical world is animated by the spirit world, hence animism. Almost all tribal cultures are animistic. Here in North America, Native American culture is animistic. And so this is why, even if you've had limited exposure to it, they believe in thousands and thousands of gods and spirits, and we talk about a river spirit or the tree spirits or the sun or the stars or the moons or everything. There's some spiritual thing going on behind it. And it's not just that everything has a spirit, but everything physical that happens has a spiritual reason why it has occurred. And so in Vanuatu, they are subsistence farmers. It's a very poor developing country. When I say subsistence farmers, that means 80 to 90% of the population live on whatever food they grow, the fruits and vegetables they grow in their own garden, whatever fish they catch in the sea. Subsistence farming is when the only access to food you have is what you have grown and cultivated yourself.
Sure.
And so let's say I have a really good yam crop this year. They eat a lot of root vegetables, sweet potatoes, yams, taro, manioc, also called cassava, all these different, that's the bulk of their diet is these root vegetables. So I have a really good yam crop this year. Then the spirit world is pleased with me right now. They've blessed my fields.
Interesting.
My child gets sick. See, immediately I say that in the Western world, we're going to germs, we're going to pathogens, diseases, et cetera, et cetera. In their world, when a child gets sick, I'm looking for a spiritual reason why the gods are angry and I'm being punished.
Man, that is quite different than Western. So, I mean, yeah.
It's extremely different.
This is like, yeah. You're
So we're getting deeper and deeper. This is way, 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 way deeper than language. Our Nevan brothers and sisters, and they're one example of many, and I'm using them because that's the context we were in. They genuinely see the world differently. They process information differently. They look for meaning and reason in life in different ways than we do. What is valuable to them? What is important to them? What has significance to them? What their priorities are. Totally different than ours. So it's way, way, way beyond. They speak a different language. They wear a different style of clothing than me. They like a different kind of food than I do.
Yeah, no, it kind of going back to how I prefaced this at the beginning, like adaptability, like seems like one of the number one skills you've got to have to make it. The ability to flex foundations you don't even know you have to like accommodate. Paul talks about becoming all things to all men. So that
I think of that verse almost daily. All things to all men that I might win some. That I will say it this way, and I laugh about it. I've talked to other missionaries like dumb prayers when you're young in ministry. I say foolishly, not that it's a bad prayer, but me being a fool, not understanding what I was praying. I remember as a young minister in Bible school with a desire to do missions work, praying that prayer regularly. Lord, I want you to shape me and mold me. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll do anything you want me to do. I want to become all things to all men that I might win some.
Yikes.
That is stupid hard. It's like ridiculously frustrating and hard to do. And I still don't feel like I do a very good job of it. I'm at least now conscious of what I'm asking. If I were to pray something like that. A good missionary is, you must be curious. You've got to be observant. You need a strong dose of humility, a willingness to learn and to look. And as you said, you've got to be adaptable. A rigid missionary is going to be a missionary a short amount of time.
Wow.
There's got to be a high level of humility. You've got to be willing to recognize that I don't know what I'm doing when I get there. I'm going to have to learn. I'm there so specifically Rachel and I, we went to be Bible school administrators. So we ran a school, a ministry training school. It was a 2-year program. And we're helping prepare men and women for pastoral ministry as they go back to their villages and reach their tribes. And it's easy to walk in and think, I'm the one with the theological education. I'm the one with 20 plus years ministry experience. I'm the one who's coming in to help these locals, these native young men and women who have a desire for ministry and pastoring. I'm going to impart knowledge to them. And if they will spend time with me and glean from what I'm doing, then they'll learn and they'll be prepared for ministry. Yes and no. But when I first get there, I better be the student. Now, there are things that I can do. I can do an Old Testament survey course, and I can walk you through the books of the Bible and talk about how they connect together. And I'm the expert in air quotes in that when I step into the classroom and I'm teaching that classroom. But then we get to the pastoral side of ministry, the day-to-day interactions with people and how we do things. And I have no clue what I'm doing when I first get there. I'm not prepared to answer those questions.
Wow.
You get there and you learn in time. And we're very fortunate we were not on our own. we had senior missionaries who had already served in the country for 11 years when we got there. They had already been missionaries in the Pacific for almost 30 years. Peter and Robbie Gratian were wonderful to us, and they were a huge help as we were getting started. So we worked with them, reported to them, and they helped get us oriented. But when we first got there, I remember Peter Gratian talking to me, and he was very kind when he said this and very gracious. But he said, here's what we're going to do. When you're in the classroom, if they ask you a theological question, answer it. If they ask you a Bible question, answer it. If they ask you anything pastoral or anything about relationships, do not answer the question, send them to me.
Wow.
Now, I had already pastored. My wife and I had pastored in the United States before we came to. Do we know nothing about interpersonal communication? No, but we knew nothing about tribal culture and village life and the implications of how we answer things. And I'm still oriented towards an individual. And the person asking me this question is not just thinking about them. They're thinking about their brother or their sister or their cousin or their uncle who's the pastor, or if I respond this way or if I do this, how does this impact so-and-so, and what does this do, and does it bring honor or shame to my family? And there's this web of intricate relational connections we were clueless about when we first arrived.
We've got a couple open tabs that we've opened. I want to orient us to some audience questions.
Circle back towards
So we've talked about, faux pas as a missionary. We'll get into, we'll have a chance to circle back to that. So there's some audience questions about, what are some of the toughest battles you have to face, and so we can maybe weave that there.
Yeah.
There's people who want to know more about your background. You've kind of dropped hints about being educated, about pastoring, a military family, and we'll probably start there in just a second. And then there's going to be other questions about how can somebody else join the missionary path. So we'll get to all of that. Let's start. Let's take a second to just rewind back to before you became a missionary. Can you give me a 5 to 10 minute crash course through the life of Desi and then Rachel Lugo, and how you get to be where you're at now, which is at my table. And through that, we'll talk about what deputation is after that and all.
Sure. So I'll back up. I think this is kind of boring, but you asked, so I'm willing to share it. So I grew up in the Northwest. My father was Air Force. I was born at Madigan Army Hospital. He was stationed at McChord Air Force Base, but they didn't have their own medical facilities at the time. And so, spoiler alert, I'm in my 40s. I'm a child of the 80s. And so I was born at Madigan Army Hospital. My father was stationed there. That was his final posting. He retired, bought a house close to the base. So I grew up on base and around the base. We lived off the base, but we did our shopping at the base. The only thing I did not do on that McChord Air Force Base was go to school, because I went to public school in Puyallup, the community where we lived, and church. I went to a local church. Everything else was on that base. So I say that just to stress, I'm military. I grew up in a military family. That is my orientation. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. That's my orientation. My wife, Rachel, grew up on a 2,400 acre farm in the tiny, tiny little remote Lake Village, Arkansas, southeast corner of Arkansas, right on the Mississippi River. So my wife has a little identity crisis if you ask her where she's from, because it's down in the southeast corner of Arkansas. So if you ask her, she was born and raised in Arkansas on a farm. But the town was 20 minutes away, directly across the river in Greenville, Mississippi. And so was the church. And so was Walmart, and so was the grocery store, and so was everything else. So if she's talking to anybody, she's from Mississippi. My wife will tell you she's a Mississippi girl, which is truthful. And then if she's talking to family, she has family and relatives, 40 minutes south of her on the Louisiana side. So depending on who she's talking to, she sounds like she's from Louisiana.
Got it.
But the point is, it's rural agrarian culture. She grew up on a large farm. Her father farmed soybeans, rice, and corn. And her father's a minister. Her parents are ministers.
Okay.
He assisted in a church in Greenville, Mississippi for 30 years. So my wife grew up in a ministry home in a very southern, rural, agrarian landscape. I grew up in a military home in a very metropolitan, urban, multi-ethnic Northwest environment where my mother was apostolic, my father was not. So our worlds are very, very, very different. We both ended up at Christian Life College in Stockton, California, in Bible school. We met there. We met on a missions trip to Sweden, dated, got married, and then we spent 10 years in California assisting in church in California. Then we moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where I met you because I went back to school. Let me back up. We both have a Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies, in theology. So both my wife and I have a bachelor's degree in theology. Then later, 10 years later, went back to school in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to Urshan Graduate School of Theology, and I did a master's program in theological studies. So I have an MTS, a Master's of Theological Studies. Then we stayed in St. Louis for a few more years, assisting in the church that you grew up in.
Yes, and this is the point in time where I intersect.
Yeah. So I'm a seminary student, and my wife and I were on staff at the sanctuary with Tim Dugas, Scott Graham, and Mitchell Bland. And so we were responsible for guest care. We were responsible for visitors, new converts, discipleship, Bible studies, anything and everything related to that.
Got it.
So we spent 4.5 years in St. Louis. And then after that, we moved to Newark, Delaware, and we spent 4 years on the East Coast. Newark, Delaware is the very northern tip of Delaware. It's basically the southern edge of the Philly suburbs. So, and we're also 2 hours southwest of New York Metro. So give you an idea of roughly where 2 hours from New York, and then we would have been 2 hours to the east of Washington, D.C. So in between New York and Washington, D.C., and we spent 4 years there pastoring in a church. And then in 2021, we stepped away from pastoring and moved to global missions. And we got a call. Well, let me back up one step. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
At the end of 2020, we felt a transition coming in our ministry in prayer. We stepped back from full-time pastoring, resigned our positions there. We were full-time working at a church. I had been bivocational for 16 years in ministry. And by this point, I was now full-time pastoring, working in a church. Stepped out of that role. We were seeking direction. And in January of 21, the Lord spoke to us and told us that the less you own, the easier it will be to do what I asked you to do next. So we put our house up for sale.
Wow. Without knowing what the next step was.
I had no idea what we were going to do. So we put our house up for sale.
That's
got that ready. Sold our furniture.
Wow.
Started giving away things, emptying our house. Our kids laughed because we sold our dining room table and chairs. So we're eating meals, plates on our lap, sitting on the couch. We sold our bedroom furniture. Our mattress was on the floor in our bedroom. We were like emptying this house. Don't know where we're going yet. January of 21, this is a big, bold step of faith. We're excited about it. February of 21, we're terrified because we have no idea what we're doing yet. And now we're at the, oh Lord, what did I do? Have I made some great mistake?
I better have heard the voice of God.
Yes, did I really hear the voice of God? What have I done to my family? Because we didn't know where we were going. The Lord spoke to us again, said, you're going to go south. Now, my wife's from Greenville, Mississippi, so we thought south meant Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, something like that. And we assumed we would pastor somewhere in the south. Well, later in that month, I got a call from Roger Buckland, who's a regional director for global missions in our denomination, the United Pentecostal Church International. And he asked, would you two consider being Bible school administrators in the South Pacific? Which is not what we were aiming at or thinking. But we said yes after prayerful.
You stopped that prayer with God one word too early.
Yeah, you're going south. And we went south, but we went like way south.
Yeah.
Other side of the world, southern hemisphere south.
Any more south, you're in Antarctica. So
yeah, I mean, now that we're going to the South Island of New Zealand, yes.
Wow.
Vanuatu is not that far south, but now with our new assignment that we've said yes to, now we are really, really south, bottom of the world south.
So you answered the call. And
we answered the call, and so we transitioned to global missions, and for the last 4 years, we've been with Global Missions of the United Pentecostal Church International,
Mm.
serving as representatives, or people might use the word missionaries, in the South Pacific, first in the island nation of Vanuatu. And then last year, we were asked to consider transitioning to New Zealand and going to work on the South Island. And we said yes to that. So we're on deputation now. And next year in 2026, we're moving to New Zealand to go work on the South Island.
What a story of, I guess, attraction of opposites, faith, taking steps where you don't know where they're going. But that,
Sure.
I'm sure that is a skill you've only had to flex more and more as a missionary. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, but I know God called me, and so here I am, Lord. Is kind of the vibe I'm picking
Yes,
up here.
and you've got to, you have to reorient what you're doing and what your goals are.
Mm.
And you have to think long and hard about what it is you want to accomplish in ministry.
Mm.
So we're called to make disciples. All of us. That's the command of Jesus.
Mm.
Matthew 28:19. Go make disciples. Okay. The easiest thing to do is to make disciples in your image. But that's not what he asked us to do. And the default knee-jerk reaction, the easy thing to do is to go to Vanuatu and now New Zealand and start teaching them and training them for ministry and making disciples, but then making copies of American culture without critically thinking about it. And you're like, this is the way we do church. This is how you preach. This is how you teach a Bible study. This is how you do outreach.
And that'd be especially easy because that's all.
Well, that's your frame of reference, right?
Wow.
And this is what I did when I pastored. So this is the right way to approach this.
Translate that to these
Anyway,
people.
I just translate that to these people.
Wow.
But they're not Americans. And things that worked very well in America would probably be an absolute train wreck, a nightmare in some other country. And so I have to think through, is my goal to make these people like me? Or is my goal to make them disciples? And so it really, really, really forces you to go back to the scriptures, and it forces you to think through what applications you make from biblical principles. You spend a lot of time teaching biblical principles, not as much time making applications. And as a new missionary, you don't want to make applications. I don't think you're ready to make application yet. You want to teach biblical principles. And in time, as your cultural awareness grows and as you're led by the Spirit and as you gain wisdom of your new context, you can make more and more applications there. But teach biblical principles. Teach them to follow Jesus. Help them to become biblically literate. Help them to listen to the voice of God and learn to follow the leading of the Spirit. These are discipleship things.
But this also, and in future conversations, I know we're only going to cover certain topics in part one of our conversation. But this, what I'm hearing you say, even though you're not saying it, is you're having to sacrifice Western definitions of success. Like,
yes,
which means
yes,
you have to be willing to feel like I am not succeeding. And no, maybe you will see results that translate to what you're used to seeing, but saying, I'm going to build them in Christ's image with whatever application the Spirit would have me make to their culture, and whether or not that immediately results in the types of metrics I want to see based off of what has worked. Like, you have to be in this limbo space where, like, is this working?
Space. So you talk about whether or not I see immediate results. I'll help with that. You're not going to see immediate results. Because we're talking about transformation at a deep level. So in a place like Vanuatu, where they were only introduced to Christianity, not even like apostolic Pentecostal doctrine, I just mean Christianity only 200 years ago. This is a culture where their default frame of reference is still animism. It's still highly pluralistic worship of many, many gods. It's still a culture heavily steeped in magic and black magic and witchcraft, and the most powerful person in the village is the local witch doctor. Okay. Now, not every missionary is dealing with this, but this is the culture we're in. and we're working with Christians, we're working with people who are coming to Bible school to receive ministry training, but they're going right back to their village life where that is the world that they're in. And so we're talking about huge changes. We're talking about a massive reorientation of the way they view the world, okay? That's slow.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's generational. And so Rachel and I were very frustrated at first, and we had to realize that what we're doing, as a missionary, you've got to play the long game. You've got to play the really, 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 really long game. You need to be thinking generationally about what I'm doing right now. I may or may not see much of this, but the people that I am investing in, their children are going to live completely different. We would say this to students, if I can use this one example. So in our context, we're talking to adults who are in a ministry training program who have amazing, beautiful, wonderful testimonies of how they've stepped out of that lifestyle into Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Their formative years were still shaped in animism. They're still influenced by the community talk. And we still talk to pastors who are concerned about the local witch doctor placing a hex or a curse on them. Now, they can theologically think through scripture and answer and their protection, and they're filled with God's Holy Spirit, and they have power over darkness and all that. But the reality is, when the witch doctor pronounces a curse on them, their immediate knee-jerk reaction is still to react, at least momentarily, in fear and be afraid of that power, because that's the dynamic they came out of.
Yeah.
All right? So for them, you're watching this transition in the way they think, but underlying all of that, at its core, there was still the way they were raised.
Yeah.
So that's on one level. Now here's where you really see change. And we were blessed to see some of this. We have some older ministers. I say older, meaning they've been in church 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Their children have never been to the village witch doctor when they got sick. Their children have never given sacrifices to the gods. Mm. Their children have never been raised with magic charms and totems to ward away evil spirits. They were not raised with that animistic, pluralistic worldview. That's where you really, really see significant change, is with the next generation. So we talk to students and we say, we're not just doing this, you got to think about your children. You got to think about what's coming behind you. Mm. And so I'm talking to this couple, and they're in school together and they're training for ministry. And yes, I want to see life transformation with them, but I know they have a son and daughter at home, and I'm really aiming at them.
Wow.
Their son and daughter.
The long game indeed. And you're talking about thinking generationally. Yeah, I just bring it back to sacrifice. And I know it's not about you, this is about the kingdom of God, but generations are passing for you too. And so that means you're having to know that I will spend a generation of my lifetime and see, whatever results I see, but the impact is going to come maybe after I'm dead. And willing to pour yourself out for some people you may never meet in the future.
A successful missionary has to think and work and minister and realize that the fruits of their labor are likely going to appear after they're gone. They'll see some fruits of their labor. And I've talked to older missionaries who have told me about the reward of seeing the fruits of their labor. And they will very quickly tell me, but that's after 30 or 40 years in one context.
I think this discussion about what does success look like in ministry is something we should dive into even deeper in
another conversation
in the future. It deserves a more deep dive just all on its own. And I want to make sure we can get to some more of the audience questions.
So please pick some of them.
Do me a favor. Just give me an overview of what's the day-to-day life of a missionary look like. Understanding it probably varies widely depending on whatever context the missionary is in. Just give your day-to-day life, and then contrast that with what's your day-to-day life now. What is deputation? So the two halves of what day-to-day missionary is.
All right. So missionaries vary wildly in their context. You have missionaries who go to a foreign field, and like us, we were Bible school administrators. So our primary job, our primary ministry focus was training ministers. You have other missionaries, they're going and they're planting churches. So they're doing a lot more outreach and evangelism. They're getting new churches started. You have other missionaries who go somewhere and they have administrative oversight, maybe of a whole network of churches, and they do a lot of admin work. We have missionaries who go somewhere and they run an orphanage. And so they're so what a missionary, it's a broad category, and it depends on what you're doing in ministry. So I can't speak on behalf of all missionaries, but I will try to tell you a little bit more of what our day looked like. First off, we very quickly learned that being a missionary, especially in the developing world, was not nearly as adventurous and romantic as we thought it would be, the way that we thought it would be.
Harder and more boring.
Lots of monotony, lots of hard things. In Vanuatu, because it's the undeveloped world, you're cooking from scratch. So there's no fast food, there's no quick meals, there's no, I don't feel like cooking, so let's get a pizza tonight. That's not a thing in that country. So, and when I say cooking from scratch, I really do mean cooking from scratch. If we wanted hamburgers for dinner, Rachel had to get flour and yeast and make dough, let it rise, bake it, and make hamburger buns. And then get minced ground beef, make hamburger patties, cook those, and put it together.
Yeah,
so even even a hamburger takes an hour and a half from the time you start making the bread to the time it's ready to put it on the table. So life moves slower. Now, I'm in the developing world. Someone living in a first world, and this will be us next year. We're going to go to New Zealand. I can walk into a grocery store and buy hamburger buns when we get to New Zealand.
Sure.
So that won't be our context there. So a lot of day-to-day living for us was food and necessities and things like that. It's getting ready for Bible school. That was our focus. So for Desi and Rachel, we spent multiple hours during the daytime preparing to teach, because we taught in the evenings. The Bible school is in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our students at least work part-time during the day. So we have curriculum and material, but we've got to adapt it for our context. And it's good material, but some of it doesn't work in our context.
Mm-hmm.
We were in a more extreme context in the developing world. I remember one time I was preparing and I had this curriculum and it was on spiritual leadership. And it was well-written material, but one of the lessons, the entire lesson revolved around the analogy of a stoplight.
Oh, and that just isn't gonna...
Well, I'm living in a country where these students don't even have electricity. And there's one paved road on our island, and there's not a stoplight in the entire nation. So me doing a whole lesson working on the analogy of a stoplight, not going to be helpful. So I've got to adapt that lesson. Sure. I've got to tweak it, come up with new examples and analogies.
So a lot of time is spent.
A lot of time is spent in our context and adaptation. Writing curriculum, rewriting curriculum, preparing to teach classes, making slideshows and PowerPoints and other things. So that way other teachers will have this ready for them as they're doing this, because we were working with a lot of new curriculum. That was a big part of our assignment. We knew that. Creating exams to go with the material. We were Bible school administrators, doing attendance reports, grading papers, doing other stuff. While we were there, there was a young man who came for several months to help, and he was a great blessing, and he was really eager, and it stood out to me. One day I was sitting in the office, and I've got my laptop open, and I am creating an exam for one of these classes. And so I'm looking through all the material, and I'm creating true and false and multiple choice questions and matching answers and short answer questions and fill in the blanks. And I'm just creating exams, okay, for entry-level ministerial training program. And he comes in and he sits down across from me, and in his mind, and I think a lot of people in their mind, they're going to go be a missionary in some foreign context, and they're going to be preaching to thousands and thousands of people at a time. And
Yeah.
every week they're going to be sharing the gospel message, and and there are people who do that, and that's part of it at times. But then there's a whole lot of, like working on the Bible school campus and fixing the broken fence.
Yeah.
And,
And so
cleaning something.
he wasn't
doing
prepared for.
And so he wasn't prepared for all of the like normal day-to-day, almost trivial life activities.
The grind.
And so he comes in at just living life. And so he comes in and he sits down in this chair opposite me at this desk. And he's a bit frustrated, and he's talking to me about how, and he had a chance to go do some ministry in some village churches, and that was wonderful and exciting for him. And he got a chance to do some other things. And we did have our general conference while he was there, and he did get to see large groups of people. So there was some of that, but that wasn't everything. And so he's talking to me about this, and I looked up at him and I explained what I was doing that day. And he was almost frustrated for me that I was spending hours that day creating these exams. And I looked at him and I said, this is ministry.
Yeah.
Like, this is ministry. This is missionary work. A lot of it looks like this.
So there's some notions about missionary work that even people who are wanting to get into the field need to have dispelled when they.
Or I don't want to crush anybody's dreams. I don't want to say dispelled, but maybe tweaked and adjusted.
Sure.
So there are times when you're doing the public, visible things that people see. That's part of it. That's a very, very small part of it. There's a lot of times where you're just faithfully working, but it's more public than you realize, especially in our context, like a tribal culture. Because they were watching us constantly, and they're all talking. Not gossip in a negative way, but they're just looking at that example, and they're seeing consistency. They're seeing faithfulness. They're seeing you do things and showing up repeatedly, and you're preparing to teach, and you're giving this information, and you're sitting with students after class and answering questions, and you're making time for students who need to come in and need extra help with this or that assignment. And there's, again, in our ministry context, we were Bible school administrators. And so we did a lot of things like that. Now, on the weekends, we were blessed that we were able to travel to village churches. And on Sundays, we would get to go and be in service with different people and do more of the preaching, typical, what's at least typically associated with missionary work. And even that's an adjustment. So you preach different. You better learn to preach to what fits your audience.
Sure.
We were told when we got there, and it was very sound advice. I remember Peter Gratian looking at me before I preached my first sermon in Vanuatu. He said, okay, I want you to think of like every analogy that you've ever used when you preach a sermon. And again, I'm not new. By the time I got to Vanuatu, I'd already been in ministry. 18 years.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not new in ministry. It's like, okay, so I want you to take all of your analogies and everything you've ever done with preaching, and I want you to put them on a shelf and never use them again while you're on the field, because they won't work here. And I said, well, what do I do? He said, preach from nature.
Nature.
Look at, he said, he smiled, said, get very biblical. Use biblical examples, and then do stuff about gardening, do stuff about fishing, do stuff about the weather, do stuff. Because in our context, that made sense.
Yeah.
And we adjusted, and we learned to do that. We learned to preach slower. Multiple languages, people and all
Translate,
that. Idioms don't work. Alliteration, a series of words that all have the same kind of sounds really good in your native language.
Yeah.
Doesn't translate. So like all of the like.
You keep saying this line like we're supposed to respond, but like
it's like something's not happening there.
That's
and so you learn to make those adjustments even on the visible part. That doesn't look the same. But a lot of being a missionary is living life out loud in front of people and let them seeing a consistent example of your lifestyle. It's making yourself available to help them. It's Rachel and I. For the two of us, let me also say this. For the two of us, our long-term goal was not to pastor there. Our long-term goal was not to be the person in charge of all the churches and be a superintendent over X number of churches or something like that. Our goal was to train ministers. Our goal was to prepare a group of people for ministry. And so anything and everything we could do to be an example, to build relationships, to answer questions, to help them to fall in love with God's word, to help them learn to be led by the Spirit. All of that was interrelated to being a missionary. And that's on the field.
Now, talk to me about off the field. Give me a crash course through what deputation is, and we don't need to spend a ton of time here because that will be the subject of yet another conversation we'll have about the role of deputation and allowing you to see the church from a unique perspective. So, but just give us a 5 minutes or less crash course of what deputation is, and then we'll crank through a few more audience questions.
Sure. So deputation is a term that we use to describe basically the fundraising process of a missionary. As a missionary from North America, when I go to a foreign nation, I am not going to get a job in that foreign nation. I'm not there on a worker's visa. I'm not there as a student going to school. Now, there are missionaries who do things like that. That's a different process than what I'm doing. In Vanuatu, I was there on a religious worker's visa. My visa said right on it that I was a pastor and a missionary and that it was a religious worker's visa. And it very explicitly stated, I cannot work while I'm in their country.
Wow. You can't pick
like
up
from
some
their
side.
economy. I'm not going to get like some side gig and making extra money while I'm in Vanuatu in our context. So as a missionary, I'm raising funds to go do this kind of work before I get to the field.
Okay.
And I do that by traveling from church to church for a period of time. And churches generously give offerings to our denomination's headquarters that are designated in our name, that are held in reserve for us to use when we get on the field. We get people we have a partners in missions program. These are churches that are saying, instead of giving you a large offering every month, we're willing to give you a consistent small offering every month. So that way you have ongoing funds while you're on the field. And the goal is to raise a budget that allows you to be on the field 4 to 5 years at a time.
Wow.
And then you come back to the States. And the process of coming back to the States and now raising a new budget is what we call deputation. And when you're on deputation, every week or two you move to, we have districts in our denomination. In general, I'm in Texas right now. Texas is an exception. But in general, a district is a state. So it's the Illinois district, the Indiana district, the Wisconsin district, Michigan district, Oklahoma district. These are places we've been on deputation. And I come to that district for a week or two, and there's a coordinator in the district, a local pastor, who has a burden for missions as well and connects with missionaries. And before I come to the district, he has contacted local pastors and said, we have the Lugo family coming. They're missionaries in Vanuatu or missionaries in New Zealand. They're going to be here for the next 2 weeks. Who's willing to invite them to come to your church and share their burden, share testimonies, minister in your church? And pastors will volunteer. And then when I get to that district, they will give me a list of names and churches and saying, you're with Brother Smith, Pastor Smith in this town on Wednesday, and you're with, Pastor Roberts in this town on Thursday, and you're in this place Sunday morning or this place Sunday night. And so I just go where I'm invited. I don't preset where I'm going.
But over the course of the deputation, you get to go, just hundreds of different places.
Absolutely.
Quite frequently. And so at the end of, however long it takes to raise your
usually
budget.
a year. This is a big deputation for us. Change of field, going for a long term. This deputation would probably be 16 months.
Okay.
A year, 4 months, roughly speaking.
And you'll see hundreds of churches during that time?
Absolutely.
Wow.
3 to 5 churches a week. So by the time...
Whatever that math is.
By the time we finish these 16 months, I'm on track to visit at least 150 to maybe 200 churches.
Wow. So hence another conversation we will have for our audience about Desi's perspective on the state of the apostolic church. I feel, missionaries are in some ways the most uniquely positioned people in our movement to get a broad feel.
Broad field, yes.
You know, since they're only in one place a day or two at a time, you know, I'm sure
Correct.
the depth of any one particular church is not likely to be something they have access to. But although we do have a need for, you know, depth of specific nuance for an individual church, and every church is different, you know, there's also something to be said about who is the person that can, at a high level, tell you, no, I've been to 200, 300, 400 churches over the course of my life. I know what the feel is like. You know.
So a missionary who's a career missionary has been doing this for decades, and they've done deputation 5, 6, 7 times. I know missionaries who have done 5 or 6 over the course of their career. It's no exaggeration to say that they've been to north of 500 different churches in our denomination across America. A long-term missionary. That's a lot of churches.
So for the audience, make sure you check out the other episodes that we'll release, and we'll talk more about some of the things he's learned through that experience. Let's go back to circle back real quick to working with indigenous ministers from the developing nation before we move on to some other questions, and then we'll begin to land the plane here pretty soon. One listener specifically wanted to know, like, when you leave for deputation, like, you've been doing the work, you know, however long in Vanuatu or whatever nation, and now you're plucked out of that for a long time, and in your case, you're not even going back to Vanuatu. So how do you partner with indigenous leaders in a country to make sure that when you're gone, the growth and health of the churches there continues and isn't you know, stuck on you? Because it'd be a shame to think that you pour all this in with this long-term vision, but then you have to leave because of, you know, money,
whatever,
and then all of it just burns down, and then you have to come back and do it all. Like that seems, you know, horrible to think about. How does a missionary?
And unfortunately, on occasion, things like that there are stories of missionaries who have had that happen to them, and that's not ideal. And leaving the field to go back on deputation is one of the biggest challenges in this type of ministry lifestyle. Now, we were only in Vanuatu for a little over 2 years. And again, we were working under the supervision of another missionary couple who had been there 12 years. So I was not the senior missionary, and I didn't carry the full weight of that. But ideally, missionaries have someone who can come alongside them and be their furlough replacement. So while they're on deputation, they can get someone else to come to the field.
And will there be like a small period of overlap?
There'll be a little, maybe they overlap by a few weeks or something like that, and there's a handoff, and that person is there on a temporary assignment, and they're able to continue some of the day-to-day operations. Depends on what type of ministry, again, the missionary is doing.
And are there other people, sorry to interrupt, are there people that are kind of specialists in this short-term replacement game?
Yes, so there are people who that is what they do, even as a missionary, and they're furlough replacements.
Cool. Keep going.
Usually it's a veteran missionary who has a proven track record and is highly adaptable.
Sure.
And very wise at working in a lot of different
contexts. They've been plugged in just everywhere.
Because they can be plugged into different, and my hat's off to those people, you know. And they're like going to go live in this country for a year, and then go to this country for a year, and then go to this country, and they are just doing that while the host missionary is on deputation.
A whole like sub-specialized missionary ministry
correct.
in and of itself.
Yes, it is. But correct.
Any other thoughts?
So that's ideally, but as the missionary, because I watched Peter Gratian doing this, and I was helping him with this, and that was part of my assignment working with him. You're letting people know ahead of time. Next year I'm going to be doing this, and next year we're going to be gone, and you're trying to help them plan ahead, and you're trying to get a work stable enough, not just financially, but administratively and other things, that they can function with you not on the field. Your desire is to see church growth and to see ministry growth to the point where your local pastors, even if they've been trained under your ministry, they can function without your continual, constant oversight. And we live in an age now where you have WhatsApp, and you've got FaceTime, and you've got Messenger and other apps and ways that people email, people can communicate with you. You can make internet voice over IP phone calls if you need to, but you're not on the ground with the day-to-day decisions. And hopefully you've been able to develop leadership that's strong enough that they can work in your absence and they can make decisions in your stead. And then if they reach a decision they can't make while you're gone, they can get a hold of you and you can give guidance and input. But yeah, that's a very real concern for missionaries. They need to be planning ahead and thinking about, okay, when I leave the field, and they should be thinking years out. In 2 years, I'm going back to the United States. What happens here while I'm in the United States?
So if someone's wanting to get into the missionary, business, sure, it's not a business, but if someone wants to get into that
Ministry,
line of work, that line of ministry, if they're not going to a place where there's just dozens of people already there, if they're going to a place that's more sparse, they need to be thinking, I'm going to have to be there for a significant chunk of time to make sure that I have enough runway to train up somebody to be stable when I leave.
And you better hit the ground already thinking about training leadership.
Man.
Yes. A missionary, a good missionary, is thinking, I already said it, long term, long game. They're thinking generationally. They're going to arrive thinking about training leadership, and they're going to arrive at whatever their location is, working on an exit plan. A really good missionary works themselves out of a job. And we say that in general about lots of different things in ministry and leadership, and it almost sounds cliche, but there is a built-in timer with missionary service that's counting down that you have to be very, very conscious of.
And communicating to people, so it's not, nobody's getting surprised when it's time for you to step away.
Yes.
So, okay, we've got a few more questions, and then we'll begin to land the plane. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful and fascinating conversation, and I'm excited that the world gets to be exposed to your passion, your wonderful mind, and just the example that you and your wife are striving to set. It's wonderful to have you here. The biggest joy, most difficult hardship about the path you've chosen. This could be a much bigger conversation, but let's treat this as more of like an icebreaker conversation at the end. I've got a few more sillier questions and other things, but biggest joy of the path that God's called you to, not just that you've chosen, but the path that God's called you to, and the biggest hardship. I'll have a heavier question about spiritual hardship specifically, but just at an icebreaker level.
Sure.
Biggest joy, biggest hardship.
My primary calling in ministry, which long predates being a missionary, is to train ministers. I know that is my role, my function within God's kingdom. What He has called Desi Lugo to do is to train ministers. And I did that long before I ever left North America.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
I'm continuing to do that now. And so being on a foreign field, living in a different global context, for me, biggest joy is watching life transformation of people, watching them develop ministry and their spiritual walk and discipleship with Jesus, but then watching them replicate it in others. So not just that we were able to reach these people, but our greatest joy, Rachel and I, because we've talked about it many times, is to watch people in our context when we were in Vanuatu, watch them graduate from Bible school, leave the capital, go back to some remote island, and be working in a village. The student who, on occasion, reaches out to us via Facebook Messenger when they've got cell data and internet access, which is doing, and they're showing us pictures of them, and they've taken pictures, and they're in like some basic remote village in a tiny little island you've never heard of. We know where it is. And they're teaching Sunday school to a group of village kids, or they're baptizing people in rivers, or they're doing Bible studies with people, watching a husband and wife come into Christianity and they're spirit-filled, and they do ministry, and they go through Bible school together, and they're now starting a church in their village. Watching someone graduate from their program, and a husband and wife, and they go back to a village that they grew up in when they were a child and haven't lived in 30 plus years, and they start a church, things like that. That's
peak missionary joy.
That's top shelf. Great. You asked biggest joy, things like that. Far more than being at a conference with 10,000 people. And I've been blessed to see that as well.
Sure.
Right? And not in Vanuatu, but this last year in October, took my daughter Dinah, and we were in Papua New Guinea with our friends, the Carvers, the missionaries there for their 50th celebration. And it was a small turnout. There were only 10,000 people who showed up for the conference.
Yeah.
And that's life-changing and incredible, and it's amazing to watch that many people who have traveled for days and days to come. And that's the public stuff that people see, but far more than, say, preaching to 10,000 people, watching ministers get trained and then watching them go in their context and reach other people. It's the biggest joy. Biggest challenge?
Yes. Well, and let me actually combine it with the heavier question. So the audience wants to know, like, what's the big, in the contrast to the joy, what's the biggest challenge? But another audience member wanted specifically to know, what is the toughest spiritual battle your family has to encounter as a missionary? Now, that may be a different or the same answer as the hardship, but kind of
they tie together. Missionary life is incredibly lonely. A lot of people, I don't think, realize that. It's incredibly isolating. Especially in the Pacific, because you're literally on an island. Yeah. You cannot go anywhere.
There's no one's coming to pick you up. Like, you're out there.
So I think it's even more magnified in the Pacific region because we're all on these little islands surrounded by ocean, and that stunningly beautiful crystal blue lagoon water on that white sandy beach is amazing for a vacation. But after months and months and months of seeing it, it starts feeling like a prison at times because you can't go anywhere. You only go to the beach so many times.
Let's go to the beach.
You know who's not excited about white sandy beaches and blue lagoons anymore? The Lugo family.
The Lugo family.
Like, that's not amazing to them. I mean, it's still beautiful, but it's like, yeah, let's go to a beach. And it's like, my kids do not want to go to the beach for vacation.
Yeah.
So you're isolated. You feel lonely. You're in a foreign context. It's not just foreign in a place like Vanuatu for the Lugo family. It's an alien context. Foreign is something that's different. Okay? It's not the same as here, and I recognize the overlaps. It's like, oh, they do this, whereas I do that. That's foreign.
And alien is a little beyond that.
Alien is like, I have no clue what's going on. I've never seen this stuff before. I don't understand what these people are doing. Like alien is totally different. And we were in an alien world when we moved to Vanuatu. It wasn't foreign, it was alien. We were lost.
Yeah.
And so you feel that hit you as incredible isolation and loneliness. My children were the Americans on the island. My children were the only Caucasians in the church. And that's not a racism thing, but there's a language barrier there, there's a cultural barrier there, there's an ethnic barrier there.
They stick out.
There's those, they will never blend. My children will never blend when we're in Vanuatu. Now, we were well treated, and they were kind, and people were hospitable. But it was very difficult for my children to connect with village kids and make friendships and play with them. They would always defer to us. They would honor us. They would be kind to us. But the village girls are not going to invite my daughter to come back to the village and play with them. It was like a bridge too far in our place.
I can't have the missionary come see our hut or like...
Yeah, it was embarrassing to them, honor shame culture.
Okay,
they felt embarrassed by their meager, limited surroundings. Now, it wasn't a thing for us, but for them. I just couldn't imagine the wealthy American, and it doesn't matter what your level of wealth is. When you're living in the developing world, you're an American, you're wealthy.
Whether you are wealthy or not, you're wealthy.
No, you're wealthy. I'm telling you, you're wealthy. You have electricity.
Oh, so you're wealthy. There you go.
You have running water.
Okay, I see.
Okay. You have more than one pair of shoes. You're wealthy.
You're a rich man.
You're like I own more than 2 shirts. I could go on and on and on and on and on. You pick any metric you want. We're not just wealthy, we're ridiculously wealthy by their standards. Okay? And so bridging that gap is very, very difficult. So the challenge there, you spend a lot of time as a family. You feel isolated, you feel lonely. And the enemy works on that. turns it into a spiritual battle too.
Expound.
It's easy to feel isolated, to feel alone, to feel lonely. If you're not careful, it can turn into depression. It can turn into fear. It can turn into whispers of failure. And what are you really doing here? Constant whisper of, go home, you don't belong. They'll never let you in. It'd be easier if you went back home. Why be here? You could go back to America and pastor. And I did pastor in America. And if you're a pastor here, I'm not saying it's easy, but the lie of the enemy, the whisper is, it'd be so much easier just to go back to America and be a pastor in America than it is to do this kind of thing. You deal with physical issues. The food is different. The weather is different. The bacteria and the pathogens and the disease and the sickness and infirmity is different in the country. So I will tell anyone, if you're going to consider a missionary lifestyle, you need to recognize that you're probably going to spend a lot of time sick the first few months you're there.
Wow.
That's the reality of living in a different climate, different food, different water, different everything. If you go to the developing world like we did, you're going to spend a lot of time sick. Runny tummy, as they call it, is a very real thing, and you learn to live with stuff like that. And so you're dealing with sickness, you're dealing with tiredness and fatigue.
Parasites?
You're dealing with constant parasites. Rachel lived with Giardia for 7 months straight.
Geez.
We knew what it was. There was literally no medicine on the island to treat it. So she had a severe case of Giardia for 7 months.
You have to just minister while you've got whatever going on.
Plan bathroom breaks and when you eat and how you do what, and that's part of life. So your body takes a toll. And it's not like that on all fields. Again, we're in the developing world. But your body takes a toll. But even if I live in a first world, we're going to New Zealand next year. It's first world. It's as developed. It's as developed as America, Australia, Europe, etc. And so I'm not going to deal with those kind of things. But it's still different. It's still a cultural adjustment. The first time you walk into a grocery store and you've got to buy groceries and you don't recognize a single thing in the store. You don't know the brand names. You don't recognize the food. You don't recognize, like it sounds kind of silly, but then you have to reorient your world.
I can imagine
you have to figure it like
the voice is telling me like, dude,
what are you doing here?
You clearly do not belong
here. And then even once you get over that and you learn to adapt, there will be little things that come up later on. I had someone ask me this recently. We had been there for some time and the light fixtures burned out in our house and they had these old school fluorescent bulbs and I couldn't get those and it was time to upgrade to some basic light fixtures. My father was an electrician by trade after he retired from the Air Force. I'm not an electrician, but he taught me the trade. I've done lots of residential electrical work. And I was actually excited about this because it was something tangible I could do. And just like, I just need to replace 7 light fixtures in the house. Like, I've got this. I so don't got this because I go and buy the light fixtures and I literally hit every hardware store in the entire capital. There's only like 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
But I hit them all. I even went to a specialty electrical supply store and there's not a wire nut in the entire country. And I'm not used to that. So it's like, what do? Well, they twist them together and put electrical tape over it. And I was not satisfied with that solution. And I eventually talked to somebody and figured out a different way I could wire it. And they had these terminal end connectors I could use. But it wasn't, I spent an entire day, and this is 2+ years we've lived in the country now. So it's not like my first month. We've been here over 2 years now. Okay? Like I know where all the hardware stores are in the capital at this point. And I spent an entire day trying to find wire nuts and came home and felt totally defeated because I didn't find them. And I felt like a failure once again. And all of a sudden it was like back to being my first week of a missionary. Wow. And I didn't know what I was doing. I burned the whole day and I'm just like, I can't even do something as stupidly simple as change a light fixture. Wow. Something I have literally done hundreds of times in my life. Yeah. A project that should have taken 30 minutes has turned into a 2-day project because I can't find wire nuts because they don't exist in this country.
So that just
it compounds the noise, the static in the background that's telling you you don't belong. There are spiritual attacks that come. Fear is a very real thing. And you start dealing with the spirits of a nation and what it's dealing with. And this is an animistic, pagan, idolatrous culture that is steeped in magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start teaching against magic and witchcraft, and you start dealing with stuff like that, and you stir stuff up, and it gets attention. And
saying spiritual
attention and things that want to come and attack your family.
Wow.
And make you scared and make you want to give up and make you want to go home. Long-term sickness and things that some of it may be a spiritual attack, some of it may just be a physiological thing, but then it's compounded spiritually that makes it feel worse. There is a constant pressure as a missionary. And if you end up doing this kind of work, you need to be prepared for this continual buzz in the background that will forever whisper at you, go home. You don't belong here. You're not effective. It's a lie from the enemy, but it's this constant buzz in the background that says, go home.
I think
you don't belong.
It's not the same words, but the same voice, I bet. And I'm not a pastor, but you were. A lot of pastors feel saying, "No, go home." If they already are home,
yeah.
But you don't know what you're doing. You're not effective.
Yes.
Like let somebody else take over. Like call it. Go work in a hardware store.
Yes.
Like it's the same voice, different words.
Same voice, different words. And there's a layered, and you're right, and thank you for pointing out. It's not like that's unique to missionaries, but layered on top of that, the you're not effective is the you don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And then layered on top of that is, and we may come back to this later, all of the things that I'm used to measuring, any sort of metric for success that's more easily identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
That's all been stripped away.
Sure.
Right? And so how effective am I in ministry right now? It's harder to gauge that when I'm living in a foreign or an alien context and I don't understand as much what's doing.
We definitely will, in another episode, come back to measuring success in ministry. We'll also get more into the battling suffering and how do you integrate suffering with your faith, because what I'm sure the audience is picking up on a lot is that the work of the Lord in the missionary context is it's going to take you through suffering. Now, I'm sure you would say the Lord has been with you through all of it, and I would love to hear, and we'll dive all.
Are we going to do that in a different one?
A different conversation.
Let's come back to that.
Yeah, let's and audience, please tune in to another conversation we'll post.
That warrants a whole conversation by itself.
Suffering and faith crises, we'll put them together in a separate conversation, and a separate conversation again for effectiveness in ministry. And so there'll be kind of 3 conversations. But let's begin to land the plane here. Thank you for taking time to answer all these questions. We've got one more serious question, and then a very, 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 very serious question to end it. Okay. The actual serious question is, the audience wants to know, how do people support, and I know you want to take this, I'm not trying to pump your tires here, but heroes of the faith. And I know it's not just missionaries. I know. I'm not trying to say that other people aren't following the call of God, but just people who are willing to sacrifice for the call of God. I think of a hero as someone to emulate. And like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I'm not putting you on a, oh my gosh, Desi Lugo is the best thing ever.
No.
And nothing very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
it does make me very uncomfortable.
What I'm saying is that you're a person who's pushing forward into the darkness on a frontier by yourself and asking other people to learn from you, even if you're trying to learn yourself while you're doing it, and you're trying to also be an encouragement and to people who are listening now. I consider that to be, it's appropriate to describe that as a hero without adding on to it the context of like idol worship or something like that. But
so what's the question?
The question would be, how does someone support someone like this in your shoes? Like, there's the finances, there's the spiritual prayer set of things. Is there things beyond those? How does someone support? Maybe we would say is a soldier of the faith.
Okay.
Like, how does someone support
All
someone
right.
in your shoes?
So the two big ones that get lots of attention you've already named. Cannot emphasize enough how important prayer is. And maybe we'll come back to that in the next one. We're talking about suffering and other things like that. It makes a massive difference, and I've got stories I can share about that. Financial support. We can't do this without financial support. So those are the two that get a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that's real, the prayer support, financial support. But you've also heard me talk about isolation and loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
So we have found, while we were on the field, there were people through Messenger, through an email, through a text message. We live in an information age. You couldn't do this 30 years ago, but you can now. If you have a connection with a missionary, if you're out there and you have a chance to connect with them and some way to contact them via an email, social media, or something like that, dropping them a line on occasion that literally says, I just want you to know that I was thinking about you today and just want you to know you're in my thoughts and prayers, and check on them and offer them a word of encouragement. I read your latest email report, or I saw your blog post, or I saw you posted this on and thank you, and you reach out to them. Their family, people who would reach out and they contact us on our kids' birthdays. Things that connect you back to home and people.
That makes a world.
We were sometimes little tokens have a huge impact. I remember we were at our general conference as we were getting ready to go do this. No, we had been on the field a little over a year. We came off the field for a few months to take our oldest child to college, university. He's in St. Louis at Urshan University. He's going back 1 week from now to start his third year at Urshan. But his first year, we had come off the field for a few months. We're trying to get him settled in college. And while we were off, it was October, we went to our general conference. We ran into another couple that we had met on our very first deputation. My wife was talking with the wife of this other pastor, and she complimented the lady on her dress. It was a pretty dress. Rachel liked it. She's like, I like your dress, it's very pretty. That was it. The lady said, thank you, and they went on their conversation, blah, 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 blah. And she had said it was like a brand new dress she had just picked up somewhere. Well, a little later, we get this package in the mail, and this lady wrote my wife a letter, and she said, I have never done this before, and I hope this doesn't sound crazy to you, but I saw you at General Conference a couple weeks ago, and you complimented my dress, and she had just bought it, and she said, the Lord told me to give it to you.
Wow.
And she mailed us this dress, and she's the same size as my wife. They're both all right, and it fit my wife, and it was just that one random act of kindness. But we took that back to the field, and Rachel would wear that on occasion. And every time she pulled that dress out, she'd look at it and she'd smile, and she's like, "Do you remember when so and so did that?" And she's like, "It was just this little touch point that connected us to home." We had someone else, another family that was in Australia. And he's a business owner, and he has connections, and he ships items in and out of Vanuatu, and not everybody can do this. But in our case, he reached out to us. He sent some toys to my kids, and he sent Rachel a pressure cooker. And it was more than the item itself. It was the fact that other people are thinking of us. And you may not be able to send a physical package with something to someone, but making contact with them, you're fighting that lie and that voice in the dark that says you're alone. You're forgotten.
Wow.
You're not seen. And yes, we need your prayers. And yes, we can't be on the field without financial support. But things you can do that help a missionary you connect with see that they are not alone, they are not forgotten.
Wow.
Make a huge difference. Some of my dearest friends would set up a recurring call. Sometimes we could do it, sometimes we didn't have internet and it wouldn't work. But I look forward once a month to getting on the phone and just talking to a friend for an hour. And he'd just ask me, and he's like, update me, what kind of crazy wild thing has happened to you? What's driving you? And just to talk to someone, and it wasn't even about like church stuff, it was me ranting because there are no wire nuts in this country and I don't know how to wire a light. And it was just like being a friend, not feeling alone. If you're looking for something you can do for a missionary, in addition to prayer and financial support, connecting them back to home in little ways that makes them not feel alone.
What a beautiful answer. I almost want to just end it right there, but in due diligence and care to my audience, the very first question actually I received, burning off the presses to ask you was, if you were a cereal, which type of cereal would you be and why? And that was the very first question.
You mentioned this. I was like, are you serious? You mentioned this to me yesterday. But for whoever asked that question, and don't tell me, I want you to know that I have put earnest thought into my answer.
Whoever it is, I will send this video to you directly. And here is the golden answer.
So here's the answer. If I were a cereal, I would be a fruit and nut muesli from Aldi.
Okay, explain.
All right. So number one, I like that. It's just like something I enjoy, but it's fruit and nuts. So I'm a little bit on the earthier, healthier side of things anyways. Okay. And so it's fruits and nuts, which I enjoy. And so you've got healthy mix of different things. It's a little sweet, but not yucky sweet.
Okay.
It's not artificial and fake. It's not brightly colored because I'm not a flashy kind of guy.
Yeah.
All right. So I am that fruit and nut muesli.
It's
but it's like healthy, but still kind of fun a little bit, but not anything crazy.
Sure.
And I'm a pretty like middle of the road moderate kind of guy. And then I specifically said the fruit and nut muesli like you'd get at Aldi.
Yeah.
It comes in like a plastic bag. It's nothing fancy.
Not high maintenance.
It's not high maintenance. I am so not high maintenance. I'm not flashy. Nothing sparkly about me.
Yeah.
And I said Aldi deliberately because Aldi is like good quality stuff at reasonable prices. They don't take themselves too seriously.
That's right.
And it's not flashy. And like I would be like the Aldi cereal of the world, and I would be a fruit and nut.
This nation was built on Aldi's.
Yeah. No. You asked, I clearly put some thought into it. That's what I would be.
If that's not caring for the audience, I don't know if anybody's ever put that much thought into an answer before, but that was a very thoroughly well-answered question, and I think that's a great place to end it. Desi, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for going through all this, for being vulnerable, for letting me make you a little uncomfortable with some of the questions, but just thank you for all of it, and I'm looking forward to our future dialogues. And to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been just a wonderful time getting to talk to Desi, and I hope that you guys have really been able to benefit from hearing his story and that of his family, and are going to benefit from all the conversations we're about to have.
And if you made it all the way to an end of a podcast and listened to us jabber this long, I commend you for it. Thank you.
Have a wonderful time. God bless. Thanks for joining us. If you found this content valuable, please consider supporting us for free by subscribing, sharing, and engaging with us on whatever platform you're most comfortable with. And if you'd like to support us financially, you'll receive premium and early access content. Lastly, please check out all the cool things we're working on by going to reflectiveecclesia.com. Thanks.